misunderstood in general, but especially as a entrepreneur or somebody who is intentionally designing their life. Like, there are going to be stares, there are going to be confused faces, and you are going to feel like you are an outsider. Because you probably are in this journey, whether you are starting a business or have a business, or you are, trying to live out of a van your whole life now, or you just don't want to do things that are conventional.
Yeah.
And you're feeling these feelings of, why am I the only one? Why doesn't anyone understand me? Or I have a feeling that even though people are around me and they support me, they don't get it. Like, it's just this feeling of feeling like an outcast. And our bodies don't like that feeling.
Right.
We do everything possible to fit in because of our survival needs, and that's just how we were made. And I think that's why it's so easy to give up, because if you don't have a community of people around you who get it and understand you, your biology is going to tell you that you're in danger, and it's going to stop you from doing what you actually want, will actually make you happy, because you think because of the people around you, or people not understanding you, or not having enough of that support and that evidence, that this is the wrong route for you. So I wanted to talk about that because I think it's so important, one. But two, I feel like if you can actually find positivity and strength in the fact that you're different, or the fact that you're doing something a little bit weird, that can take you a long way. I have a feeling, and I've seen it before.
Yeah. I feel like I've been misunderstood most of my life.
If that ain't the truth.
But I mean, we were talking about this earlier. This is like one of those examples of things of turning a liability into an asset. You might think like, oh, I'm an outsider, I'm a weirdo, no one understands me. Like, it's such a big weakness, it's such a big obstacle for me. But just changing your perspective on that and turning that liability, turning that obstacle into an opportunity, turning it into an asset. Because if you don't fit in anywhere, like you don't fit in at like the corporate job, or you don't fit in, at the whatever other thing that people do.
Just say you grew up in a really religious town.
Yeah, you don't fit in the church or whatever. Use that negativity almost, that kind of the lack of you fitting in, to override your biology, like the way you put it, where your biology wants you to fit in and conform. But use the fact that you're out of place to help propel you out of there and toward your dream life, or toward the things that you want to pursue.
Give me an example. Paint a picture of somebody turning their liability into an asset. Like, what does that look like? Because I heard that, I think you've told me about that before. And I didn't really understand it until I saw, when you hear somebody's success story, and how they were like, I was the town joke, I was a clown, and then they end up being famous comedian that has their own show. You know what I mean? I don't know, I'm just making that up, but I think that's happened with you before. For sure.
I don't know why. Maybe because he said comedian reminded me of Kevin Hart.
Oh, really?
Because Kevin Hart, he's always been a small guy.
So that's a perfect example.
He wasn't the biggest guy in the neighborhood, and I'm sure people would mess with him and whatnot. But what he learned from an early age is he learned how to use his words and how to influence people through, comedy and just being funny and being likable. And he turned his biggest liability, at a young age into his greatest asset, which is his mind, his ability to, make people laugh and become one of the most successful comedians of all time. And
one thing I didn't know, because I don't really follow him that much, I just watch his movies in passing, but Shaheen is I would say you're a moderate fan of him.
Yeah, I've seen interviews and stuff with him.
Okay. I don't have COVID.
Oh shit.
But the one thing I didn't realize is that he is actually one of the most successful comedians. He's making how much a year? What's his net worth? I can't remember.
I have no idea, but I'm sure it's about 100 million.
Yeah, that's, for a comedian, I think that's really good.
For anyone. Incredible.
Didn't he say one of his goals is to be a billionaire? Yeah. And I was at first I didn't because I just always think, oh, famous people rich, but I don't think how rich. I don't think about the scale.
Right.
So then
it's a huge.
Whenever he said 100 million, I'm like, that's significant. Right. I mean, and kind of crazy, you know, I'm sure with all the movies he's done, the stand-up, you know, shows, everything. But I feel like he's one of the comedians that really turned his comedy into a brand.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of comedians do that, but I feel like it's not all of them. Like I would say there's still probably like the 1% of comedians that really have like a brand, like his movies, like he has this, like his reality show. He has like so many things.
And his own production company.
Exactly. Yeah. A production company. It's like he took his talent and made it more, like made it bigger than itself, because a lot of comedians, I feel like they end up just doing like stand up, or maybe they'll have like a show that they're on, but they don't really take it further.
Yeah. So. And I think this is really a feature of human beings. It's this feature of like overcompensation. Like when there is, it's like this, like if your house is moderately dirty, you're probably not going to clean it. Right. But if you have like a party and it gets trashed, you're going to make it spotless after that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, you know, if things are like kind of bad or like something is a slight inconvenience, you're not going to do anything about it. But once it crosses this threshold where it becomes like really bad, you kind of overcompensate and make it better than it ever was before. Yeah. And like a more concrete example of that is like for me, you know, not to bring up my anxiety and stuff all over again, but when I went through that, you know, I was overweight, you know, I had probably not the best like mental practices and like habits around handling emotions and handling stress and anxiety. But once it kind of broke that threshold where it was worse than I ever thought was humanly possible, it forced me to overcome it through like good practices and good habits around like mental health and stress management. Yeah. And I think now it's like I feel like I'm pretty good at managing stress and anxiety. Yeah. No, I think that's a really good point, because it reminds me of like the double down on your strengths or your weaknesses. Actually, I want to say weaknesses, because I think like with Kevin Hart and that example you said, like losing weight and like learning how to think better, it's like you had to double down on what was like the weakness and turn it into a strength. Yeah. So anything that you're critiqued for, like for me, I've always felt like, why do I always have to have a good time? I noticed a trend that even though I was really good at conforming to like having a corporate job, getting a degree and like going to grad school and everything, I was like really good at like following the rules. I still always had this urge to be like, but I just want to do something random today. I just want to go travel with like no money. I just want to do something like wild. And I always thought that was like a side of me that I needed to like kind of get in line and like suppress. But that is like the premise of my whole business right now. And it's like, instead of forcing that trait of mine down, why don't I let it thrive? Like, why don't I let it run wild? Like, obviously with constraints, but like with my constraints that makes sense for me, like that still allow my strengths to be elevated, instead of just kind of punishing myself for being the way I am. That doesn't make any sense, you know, because you are the way you are, and like it's hard for you to change your personality traits. I feel like that's I don't know about the like scientific definition. I know there's something that you literally can't change. Like there's like habits you can change, there's like your mindset that you can change, and I feel like that does affect your personality. But I think there's just things about people that like if they didn't have that trait, they just wouldn't be them. Whatever that is, I don't think you can change that. And I don't think or maybe you should change it, right? Yeah, you shouldn't.
You shouldn't try to change it, because that's what makes you unique. That's what makes you special. And it's kind of like broadcasting your uniqueness and making it work for you. So if Kevin Hart was known to be the short guy, I mean, I do think that makes him stand out in a way, ironically. Like he's more memorable for that reason. And I'm sure back then he hated being memorable for that reason. But like, as he used his actual strengths and combined it with what, like, oh, he's the short guy, everyone knows him as the short guy, he is now memorable in a good way, because now people know him as that comedian. And I think that helps his brand. And I think it's like, stop trying to hide those. If he was trying to pretend he wasn't short or pretend that he wasn't like this goofy guy, he wouldn't be the Kevin Hart that we know and love today. And I think that's the same thing with your traits. And like with your traits, like, use your anxiety for good. You know, you're just an anxious person. You've always been an anxious person. I've always been somebody who just likes spontaneous things. Instead of just letting that come out in the wrong way, like I'm just gonna go buy a Lamborghini,
Right.
let me let it come out in the right way that actually benefits me,
like starting this podcast,
because it's a great outlet. I feel like I can help other people, and it's a way for me to continuously express that part of myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a good thing.
The larger theme here is taking that thing you see to be like a liability and turning it into an asset. I guess the specific thing we're talking about here is being misunderstood. Instead of viewing that as a liability, viewing it as an asset.
Yeah.
And I think it really is an asset for entrepreneurs, because your uniqueness gives you a unique perspective on the world, which means you're going to see opportunities that no one else can see.
Yep.